Welcome to the place. This is the place for intellectual honesty. It's not the place of. We're not qualified to say that yet. We're moving towards that. And so this is the place for intellectual honesty, spiritual honesty, whatever that is, and scriptural honesty, and whatever that is. Tonight we have Greg Brahe, the resident atheist of the New Covenant group. He's here. He's going to be giving his atheistic view on Matthew 25:46 and its context. And I think you're going to enjoy the show tonight. We're going to be doing various things tonight. So I would invite you to invite your friends. And let's have a good time tonight. And so, Greg, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. Thank you for having me. I feel welcome.
Well, thank you so much. I want to jump right into it because we've been having wonderful shows. For instance, on Sunday evenings, we've been starting, or actually this last Sunday, our first show with P.Z. Myers was, in my opinion, a good start to something good. The name of the series would be, Is Church Harmful? And P.Z. Myers came out and simply said yes, and I enjoyed the answer, but yet at the same time it's not complete. It's not something that will really give people a reason to move away from the church, and that's something that we're going to address once again this Sunday night, and we have various other people coming to the table for the discussion. In fact, we have, I think his name is Dave Silverman, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep, he is slated for March 3rd to come in, so it'll be a couple weeks out yet, but that was the earliest we can have him. Dave is the president of the group American Atheists. He's very outspoken. My personal favorite, he's actually developed a meme around him, like an online meme from a show when he was interviewed by Bill O'Reilly on Fox News, and Bill O'Reilly was basically rolling off things like, the tide goes in, the tide comes out. You can't explain that. The sun goes up, the sun comes down. You can't explain that. And Dave Silverman, his face alone, I think, made him more famous than any of the things he's done with American Atheists. So I'm excited to see him just because I'm an internet junkie as well. But he's also a very articulate speaker and very passionate about that. So I'm excited to have him, and I'm excited to make him look bad by comparison next to me.
I think that, yeah, I like the bragging points there. That was awesome. One of the things that I enjoyed about his interview with Sean Hannity was that Sean was way off. I'm talking about he was just struggling emotionally, just trying to bash him, simply trying to keep the religious right, saying amen to his particular kind of rhetoric. And that's extremely sad. And I thought that he was extremely kind on Sean's show, that is on Fox News Network. And I also did view the show that you're in reference to, and I thought that he did well. I thought that his facials, were very powerful. Needless to say, we have various people coming on. In fact, I'm going to do a show here in the near future on do we actually have a choice, that is to believe in X, Y, or Z. And I'm going to be bringing on various scientists, neuroscientists, and also psychologists and different other persons who have a dog in the fight when it comes to that kind of mindset. But tonight, let's go straight to the subject matter. And I'm assuming that you read Matthew chapter 25:46, and I would just suppose that you read it from a church model.
Well, that's the part where it says, and the Lord said, go socks, right?
There you go.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, that's John 3:16.
There you go, John 3:16. Okay,
I have read that, and I've read it in, specifically preparing for this show, read it in multiple translations and various ideas to try to not just get the church model, but it's interesting to read the commentary on it by other religious thinkers from different religious backgrounds to see where they're coming from and what they're taking away from it as well. So I think that I might have a different take on that than any of them, and possibly you, probably you.
Now, there are various people, and I'm in a sense proud, but yet still disappointed, simply because lots of people are moving into the camp called universalism. And I keep asking universalists, what is your hermeneutic? And what that simply means is, what is your method of translation? What are the principles involved in your interpretive process? And they can't tell me. And when you examine what they think to be true concerning the text, it's as if they have gone back into a model of decoding in which they are looking at words. In other words, their idea is that, well, it's, this eternal punishment seems a little bit radical here, and so let's look at the word eternal in the Greek. And so they're looking at the term, trying to find the Greek word and trying to assess what that Greek word means. I keep telling people, if you're going to transport one language into another, and if these languages are not identical, if their verbs, nouns, participles, infinitives are not identical, the thing that you need to look for is not swapping word for words. You need to swap meaning for meaning. That's why a direct model of translation technique doesn't work. And in this case, in Matthew 25:46, you have a juxtaposition, and the juxtaposition is in the state of metaphor. And so if you have metaphor that you're trying to transport into English, I fail to see the point as to why someone would want to deal with one word at a time. That's not sensible to me. I think that translators, all translators, simply read Matthew and get a comprehensive understanding of Matthew, and therefore retell the story in a way that English readers can understand coherently in their own language. For instance, if I get pickled, that is, as people understand getting pickled in English, if I translate that back into Greek, it's going to be extremely hard, because trying to look for a cucumber idea of Greek to make the same point idiomatically doesn't make sense. And I think most people can wrap their minds around that. However, I want your ideas concerning this text. I'm not committing. I've told all of the viewers that I'm going to do a marker board analysis on the entire context of this, and I'm going to do that in a few days. But I want your idea. I mean, it starts in verse 31. Let's start there. When the Son of Man comes in his glory.
Which translation are you using?
I'm using the one that the Baptists are pontificating. It's red, and they love red because it stands for the shed blood of Jesus Christ, who atoned for their sins. And so if they believe it, they get eternal life, you see. So it's a Holman Christian Standard Bible that I'm reading out of. And I can read out of, I have, I think, 52 or so translations here at my fingertips, but I want to read out of this one just for a moment. And it may not follow word for word as to what you're reading.
I pull up the same one that you just had. So I use BibleGateway.com for a little plug. It's fantastic. They have a parallel option that you can read literally right next to each other, 3-5 different translations. So I pulled that one up.
I actually had a group of universalists that told me that they were coming up with a translation, and I said, "You are? What are you doing?" "Oh, we're using Bible Gateway." And so, since it has a little bit of Greek and a little bit of Strong's Concordance, they are trying to translate by using techniques of just looking up something in a dictionary and translating. I said, words don't work that way, and they got aggravated, and yada, yada, yada. Verse 31, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, just as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Listen to this. He said, for when I was hungry, I gave you something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, and thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will answer them, I assure you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it for me. Then he will also say to those on the left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into eternal fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take care of me, or take me in, actually. I was naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not take care of me. When they too will answer, Lord, then they too will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or without clothes or sick or in prison or not help you? Then he will answer them, I assure you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me either. And they will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. So, what are your ideas here?
Well, this is a tough one. It really is, because there's elements to it that I don't know the original Greek of this, and I can't give any critique of the translation. I can say that I have looked at several, and most of them essentially tell the same story, even if the words change a little bit. But there's things about this that I actually do like, and that's what's strange is a lot of people accuse atheists of being completely unwilling to admit that there's any benefit to anything that's in the Bible, and that's simply not true. It's, as a philosophical text, there certainly are things that are valuable, and the main theme of this is that if you're a real good person, or what it means to be a good person, is to feed the hungry when they're in need, to give drink to the thirsty, to take in strangers, to clothe the naked, basically to help the people that are in absolute need. And that, I think, is a fantastic point, and it's something that unfortunately is not emulated by nearly enough Christians who claim to have this book as their background. To me, that is a very humanist value, and I personally ascribe very strongly to that idea. But then 46 rolls around, and it just seems out of place, to be honest, to go from feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, give clothes to the naked, and then those of you who are the least, and in that, contextually speaking, I'd almost say spiritually poor, in need of assistance in another way, we're gonna cast you away into a pit of eternal punishment. And it follows a theme in this, the entire Matthew 25 book has 3 stories in it, and each one ends with some sort of horrible shunning or maltreatment of a group that didn't have the favor in the first place. And it just seems like each story progressively is a greater non sequitur. It just doesn't follow where it comes. And then the best part is going on to the next chapter. And I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what context or how big of a context you wanted to go, but when you get into 26, the very first part of 26 is a lady pouring an entire bottle of perfume onto Jesus. I think it's his hair, or a fragrant oil. And the disciples say, "What are you doing? We could sell that and we could use that to feed the poor." And Jesus says, Well, the poor will always be here. You've got me here now, so it's okay to do something like this and waste it on me. It just, again, it just is a complete it, contradictory cycle in each story, in each case, and that, it boggles my mind. I don't know if I were to even accept all of this as literal, which part would be the literal truth, which part you would follow. It's chasing its own tail. So that's my initial take on it.
Well, let me make a couple of statements. First of all, to be fair, this document called Matthew was never intended to be a written document passed around in book form. They didn't have books back then. The closest thing that they had to a book was called a codex. It's similar to, say, a Post-it note or a series of Post-it notes. You know, you simply have paper and it's stacked, and you have with glue on the end of it, and that's about it. In this case, they had papyri, similar to corn shucks, stacked on top of each other, and they would put weights on them and actually glue the ends. And so these things had to be carefully taken care of, and so you had scribes, and then you had readers. And so the context of Matthew, if you study the internal and external evidence, this particular document was read to people simply because people didn't have books. They were not trained in reading because they didn't have lots of material to read. And so most of the people in that day were illiterate. And so this is something that you would read to people. And it had to be in the kind of language that was easy, palatable, if you will, for people to understand. And so it's very much a read document. It's a document that, you know, you may get to hear at one time. You don't have time to exhaust lots of time in studying this. And so the intention of this particular book at large is not to be something that we study every day and try to hide in our hearts so we don't sin against God. That wasn't the intent. It's simply something that these people simply read orally, and people could gain a point or two, and that was fine, and they moved on. My point in stating that is, here you are, you're a biologist, a well-trained biologist, and you're more than capable of reading any English document and understanding it. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. I've asked these same questions to theists, and I've never heard one of them answer it rightly. So my question to you about chapter 25 is this, and I'm putting you to the test as a reader.
All right, let's see what we can do.
Chapter 25. Do these people go into eternal punishment, whatever that means? And it's superfluous as to whether that's actually a mistranslation or not. Do these people go into eternal punishment or into eternal life because they believed that sweet Jesus was their Lord and Savior? Is this a chapter based upon the consequences of believing, or is this a passage, context, for the consequences of not giving someone something to drink, something to eat, clothes, and visiting people in prison?
You see, that's a tough one because it contains elements of both, particularly the first story. When we talk about the 10 virgins or the 10 bridesmaids, because that one is not nearly so much about the actions towards other people, but the vigilance. And of course, they're all parables, so they're not meant to be, well, I can't say that they're all parables. The third one has been ascribed by many people to be an explanation of the first two parables and the meaning of them. So I don't know. I don't make a judgment either way on that one. But I'll say that for the first two parables, both of them have to do with a different kind of faith. You're being trusted with a responsibility to do something. And the first one, the responsibility is to just remain vigilant and watch for something to return and to be prepared properly personally for it. The second one is to take what you were left in the meantime and do something with it while you're waiting. And the third one is specifically about what happens when that master gets back. So they each tell a little bit different story. And I would argue that the context for faith and the context for works are both there, but it is more strongly suggesting it's much more about what you do when the
But are not the trusting elements in the entire context of 25 and the behavioral aspects of what you do, that is the works, quote unquote, do you think that Jesus, whoever this person is attempting to change the behavior of people?
Yes.
So you would agree that possibly this is about augmenting or changing the behavior of people who would ignore feeding people?
Possibly, yes. I'd say that this is a call for compassion, to some extent,
Okay.
and essentially, I'd almost argue it's the opposite. Not so much a call for compassion, but a condemnation for those who don't exhibit it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
It seems.
Now, I'm going to read a subsequent passage, and I didn't even ask you to prepare for this one because I wanted to get your initial response on this. And if you want to follow along, it's found in Luke chapter 16, verse 19. It's Luke chapter 16, verse 19. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Greg Brahe. He is the resident biologist of the New Covenant group. And he's also
Now
a
we're reading a book
practicing...
by a doctor, right? And then Luke is a doctor,
Yeah, Dr. Luke.
the resident doctor of the Bible.
Well, I wouldn't go too far with his kind of doctrine, but here we have not just a biologist, but an atheist who is rendering Scripture tonight. I'm impressed thus far. Let's look at chapter 16 of the book of Luke, and let's read this. It says, "There was a man who would dress in purple and fine linen, feasting lavishly every day. But a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, was left at his gate. He longed to be filled with what fell from the rich man's table, but instead the dogs would come and lick his sores. One day the poor man died and was carried away by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried, and being in torment in Hades, in this context, and most versions say hell, he looked up and saw Abraham a long way off, but Lazarus at his side. 'Father Abraham,' he called out, 'have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this flame.' 'Son,' Abraham said, 'remember that during your life you received your good things, just as Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here while you are in agony. Besides all of this, a great chasm has been fixed, that is, a gulf, been fixed between us and you, so that those who want to pass over from here to you cannot, neither can those from there cross over to us.' 'Father,' he said, 'then I beg you to send him to my father's house, because I have 5 brothers, to warn them, so that they won't also come to this place of torment.' But Abraham said, 'They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them.' 'No, Father Abraham.'" Listen to how the rich man is saying no to Abraham. "No, Father Abraham." Notice what he calls Abraham, Father Abraham. He said, "But if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." But he told them, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be persuaded if someone rises from the dead. So once again, the question is, Greg, after listening to this and reading it with me, is this about who you believe in, or is this about the consequences of what you've done? That is, as to whether you go to hell or to the side of Abraham.
I think that there's enough context there to make a weak argument that it is about who you believe in, but it's very strongly about what you've done. The biggest thing in this one is, I guess, the what you believe in or who you believe in argument would come from the Moses and who was the other person that he cited. He said, they have. Oh, Moses and the prophets. It wasn't cited by a name. So, in that respect, he says, well, if they won't listen to them, then they won't listen to a dead man rising from the grave either. And that is an argument for faith in the text, in the Bible, and what it contains. Of course, found within the pages of the Bible itself. So, it's
now as a biologist, you might be able to answer this. Most people in Catholicism and also in Protestantism actually believe that this is a case where the rich man is actually in hell and he's begging for a drop of water to be put on his tongue. My question is, if someone is actually in torment to this degree, on fire, burning in the flames of hell, could he have a conversation this rational with Abraham?
I would say no. I'd say that this, I mean, we can't necessarily know what reasoning abilities a non-corporeal body may have. If we were to exist only in the spirit, we could potentially be in multiple places at once even. So when we want to get into the level of theology, that's the problem, is that you can make something up to match any question and just create a new theology around it. But that I would argue on a human standpoint, no, absolutely not. I've known people, actually two people who have been in bonfires, fallen into fires and gotten severe burns on large portions of their body. And from what I understand, it is the most blinding and excruciatingly painful experience a person can even imagine, to the point where words can't describe it. So there's no reasoning if you're on fire.
I took this passage to 10 places, some of the best burn units in America. One was the Shrine of Burns in Galveston, Texas. And I asked the physicians there who were dealing with people screaming. It's a horrible place to have to be in. And if you visit there, you will just weep. It's horrible. The smell is just I won't get into that, because possibly some people who are listening might have had a loved one in that particular condition. But I asked simple questions like, is this possible to have a reasonable conversation, that is, with someone if you are burning or being tormented in this kind of context? And every physician who worked in these burn clinics and hospitals laughed at this and said this was a pitiful text, if that were true. And so in a sense you're agreeing with that, is that correct?
Absolutely. A literal interpretation of this as a corporeal or it being relevant in any way to a human experience of burning is not rational at all.
Do you think the guy in this context has somewhat changed his mind about how he treated the beggar, that is Lazarus?
I don't know, to be honest. This would be one of those, the questions of, is it really a moral or ethical position if you're doing it simply out of fear of punishment?
Right.
And I would say that it's possible. It seems to have, or he has some regrets, but even the first thing that he goes to is his brothers saying, no, go, please, I beg you, send somebody or send Lazarus to my brothers to tell them not to do what I did. Which is to some extent a selfless act to protect them, but it's still going to his brothers and not even, I guess he's not taking any personal responsibility within the framework of the story anyway. He's just saying, it's too late, okay, I give up.
But is there a possibility that he does feel remorse for what he had done?
Sure, it's not explicit, but I mean, there certainly is some implication of remorse in there.
Is there any implication at all about Lazarus being a believer in God at all in the context?
Not from this particular story. No, it actually it doesn't really say anything about what Lazarus has done other than having a crappy life. That he's
So
not.
we have absolutely no evidence that he wasn't an atheist. He could have been an atheist. True. That's just as
Well,
probable as being an atheist. He
it's probable if you look at only this passage. I don't know how much more there is about Lazarus before he's resurrected, but
now this
it's certain.
now this is a borrowed story. This is not a story that was told for the first time by Jesus. It was told many, 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 many times well before Christ. And so is Jesus using this passage, if I'm, stating something accurately, is he using this to teach morals, or is he teaching this to say some people go to heaven and some people go to hell? In your opinion, that is, in the opinion of an atheist.
I would say that this is very obviously um, a moral lesson. It's not very different from Aesop's fables or from even Grimm's fairy tales. That all of them have a deeply embedded moral lesson. That I mean, Grimm's fairy tales are rather gruesome in many many ways, but all of them have a lesson or even several lessons associated with them that can be taken away from them, and this is no exception.
So
It's
is it possible that we take cartoons and myths and maybe exaggerate them a little bit, put a little hyperbole in it, make it like a movie in order to make a teaching point? Is that possibly what people do, and sometimes it turns out to be good?
I'm I guess I didn't fully understand the question.
Do we take, that is, as parents or maybe just teachers, do we sometimes take legends and myths and even fiction and put them together in the form of a movie or whatever, simply to make a teaching point, maybe to correct behavior? Do we do those things?
Well, absolutely. I mean, narrative devices are very, very effective, even and especially when they include familiar archetypes.
Yeah. Let's go back to Matthew 24. I'm enjoying your points here. So if we go back into Matthew 25, do you think it's rational to talk to people about, well, why don't you be the nice guy and feed somebody, give someone something to drink, clothe them, and even visit them in prison? And if they don't do that, you send them into this eternal punishment. And please understand this, most Catholics and Protestants believe that this is people being sent to hell. Do you think that it would be justifiable in your mind if someone failed to give something to drink to send them to hell?
I honestly I can't, unless if we define hell in the traditional sense of a place of eternal torment, or as it was said in here, or in the second parable, I believe this is the one with the wailing and the gnashing of teeth, or weeping and gnashing of teeth is the story of the talents. And then the other one is, let's see, just being left out in the cold is essentially. So there's a little bit of different levels of torment in that, being left out away from the bliss in the first case, or being more and more tortured in each one. But if we're going to go with the most extreme examples of eternal torment, I can't think of anything that would ever possibly could ever even justify something of that nature. I mean, eternity is a number or a scope that humans are simply incapable of understanding. As we live longer, I'm 27 years old. I'm about to turn 28. And my son is 2. The last 2 years of his life have just flown by for me. But he's only been alive for 2 years, and he only remembers maybe a year of it. So that was a really long year as far as his contextual framework. And when we talk about the scale of eternity, is imagine for a moment that the earth has been around for, and now I'm pulling a number. I always want to say 4.6 billion years, but I wonder if it's 6.4. Then it's been for billions of years, not thousands, not millions, but
You mean over 6,000 years?
well, I mean, depending on which presuppositional model you're going to take, since we can't know anything.
Yeah, I understand. I'm toying.
But the, uh, the thought of a billion years is something that the average person can't. Frankly, the thought of a million is something that the average person can't even conceptualize. There's a song in the musical Rent that I saw on Broadway. Fantastic musical, but it's Seasons of Love is I think the name of the song. But it opens with the words 525,600 minutes, and that's it. Then goes through several other things, but what that is the measure of a year. There are just over 500,000 minutes in a year. So it takes 2 years to hit 1 million, or nearly 2 years to hit 1 million minutes. That means it takes 2,000 years to hit 1 billion minutes. We're talking Jesus was 1 billion minutes ago.
Yeah.
If we take that into the scale of 1 billion years and then say 6 times that is the amount of time that even just the Earth has been around, and then 2.5 times that is the amount of times that the universe has been around, and then we consider the concept of eternity and say that massive scope of time is the blink of an eye on an eternal scale. It doesn't exist. It's so short that it is imperceptible without infinite zooming in.
So in a sense, you're saying that you would say that if someone were eternally punished or put into hell, the lake of fire, whatever, for eternity, that would be unjust and immoral. Would you agree?
Absolutely, for anything. I don't care what you've done. There is not a single thing that could possibly justify an eternity of torture.
Not even murder.
Not even murder.
Wow. I love you. That's great.
Torture is one of those things, too, that people don't really understand. That torture, I mean, this is a personal passion of my own. It's just a political passion, but I think that torture is the most reprehensible thing that humans do to other humans, even if we're doing it for a good cause. If it's something that we're trying to glean special information out of something, or I mean, anybody who watched the show 24 thinks that torture works really well to get things out of people. In reality, what torture gets is whatever you want to hear is what you're going to be told. It's horrible. It's absolutely detestable in every way, and there's so many forms of torture. But imagine even simple torture. I can tell you, last night my dog woke up about every 45 minutes, and my son woke up about every hour and a half, or well, I guess it was alternating about an hour. So I never got more than 45 minutes of sleep at a time last night, and I was crabby and irritable today. It was very difficult for me to wake up this morning, and that was just because I didn't get into a deep sleep cycle, and that's very important for us. Now, one very effective form of torture is just not letting people sleep.
Right.
Imagine somebody doing that to you for 4 days in a row. That can literally kill you. So even just sleep deprivation in that respect of torture would be something that the average person would find mind-bogglingly difficult to handle. And we use the term eternal torment in a lake of fire. When the average person couldn't even handle the 4 days of being kept awake, it's just, we don't understand the scope of what we're saying and really prescribing to these people. Torture is bad.
I was talking with some theists on the side of the road the other day, and I sometimes carry a cigarette lighter. I don't smoke, but I'm getting ready to light up a cigar. but I have this lighter in my hand, and I want to demonstrate if I can get a camera on this to my left. I took this lighter and I lit it just like this. And I said, I want you to take your hand and I want you to put it over the fire, and I want you to keep it there for 2 minutes. That person couldn't even keep it there for over a second without pulling away. And I said, just keep it there for 3 or 4 minutes and tell me that's just in any sense. And they couldn't. And I said, start doing the math. Start thinking about what it means to burn someone eternally, because that was their doctrine. Their doctrine was that God was going to burn us in this literal lake of fire forever, not just 2 or 3 minutes, not just for 2 or 3 days, but for billions of years beyond that. And I said, is that just? That is based upon the consequences of not believing or doing the wrong thing, not giving someone something to drink. And I said, the major premise of this passage is, if you don't give someone something to drink, if you fail at giving someone something to drink or nothing to eat, or possibly you don't clothe them or visit people in prison, this is where you get to go. And so the church world is caught up in this kind of theology that says if you don't believe the right thing, if you don't trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior, you have to go and burn forever in hell. However, there are those in theism, most of them refer to themselves as universalists. They're simply saying that this doesn't make sense. And so they've looked into the Greek terms and they're coming up with these ideas, well, this is a corrective process rather than a punishment process. And so I would agree to a certain extent that they're going in the right direction. I don't agree with their methods and practices of translating, obviously, but I think that people are starting to feel like they have a right to be intellectually honest. From a biological standpoint, what can you say to that? Why is that happening?
From a biological standpoint,
Yeah.
why are people becoming more willing to step away from some of these church traditions?
Why are people becoming intellectually honest from a biological standpoint? Because I'm getting ready to do some shows with various these neurobiologists, etc., who have ideas about why we do things. And we're going to have psychiatrists here, all kinds of people, because I'm interested in why we think like we do and why we behave like we do. What are your thoughts?
Well, first I'd make the argument that it's not really a biological question. It's more of a sociological question. It's something that is probably more, yes, I mean, on the biological standpoint, there was a time in human history that questioning such doctrines could end your life. So that certainly has a biological survival imperative associated with it. But there's also the sociological aspect is, I think, much stronger, is that we have an environment now where we are far less culturally interdependent as we were. And that means that each of us expresses our individuality in different ways now. And it's encouraged to some extent. And I would argue in some ways that this change has been bad for human culture, but in many ways it has been good. So there's something to be said with the fact that we have this freedom because the freedom to do this, because we have the freedom to do this. I know it sounds redundant, but there's a time when it simply wasn't practical to take the risks associated with questioning things of this nature, and potentially risk being shunned from your community, your family, your church, which was often also the governing body of your area, and potentially even be locked up or put to death. So there's certainly a lot of psychological and sociological and biological imperatives associated with that. But now we are at a point where it's a bit easier to survive on your own and to float around in different ways, and that allows us the freedom to get outside of that box that the society around us would put us in, um, and and question things for ourselves. And that is something that I absolutely encourage in every way, is questioning things for yourself, and questioning them correctly with
I have
responsible skepticism.
I have a couple of different philosophers that I'm trying to get to come to the show. I'm not convinced that I can get them to be on the show, but they seem like they're moving our way, that is, in committing to a conversation. They made the other day some comments, and I want to hear your view on this. They stated that, and please understand, these are Calvinist. I don't know if you're familiar with Calvinism or not, but
I'm an atheist. I have to be familiar with all of these.
okay, well,
backgrounds.
good
It's
deal.
not like
These
Christians are only-
guys make an issue over election. Some people are elected to go to heaven. Some people are elected to go to hell. And if you can't believe, atheist, you have this double election. You're elected to go to hell. You're incapable of believing. And so they teach the doctrine of irresistible grace, and one of the philosophers, actually two of the philosophers, made the statement that this is a neurological problem. In other words, they were saying that atheists have neurological problems. That's why they can't believe in God. What are your thoughts?
I've heard that said before. I've never found any sort of peer-reviewed study that's found any sort of neurological difference between atheists. There is something to be said, though, in the autism spectrum is related very much with atheism, which I found interesting, or particularly Asperger's syndrome. But there could be a connection. I will say that as far as I am concerned, that description from the Calvinists is probably pretty accurate to me, is that I've tried. I really did. I put in years of effort. This subject, obviously, by what I do, still fascinates me. It drives me. It is my passion. This is what I am, I forgive the terminology here, but what I'm called to do. And even so, I can't believe in a God. I simply... And I can't say that there's not something that could make me, but the kind of things that could make me believe in a God would never be described as faith. I would believe in a God because I am compelled to do so through some kind of compelling evidence, and that could potentially be what the Calvinists are talking about. I would imagine that an all-powerful God, or even a sufficiently powerful entity, could just force me to believe in it. If it's capable of creating the universe, I'd imagine it's capable of adjusting the neurons in my brain enough to make me believe in it. So it's potentially, again, it's true. And if that's the case, and if they believe in hell, then I guess I'm going to hell.
Wow. I thank you for your honesty. I think these people... well, I'll keep my comments to myself. I think that I'm getting ready to make a point. I went out before the show, and I bought a cigar, and it's called Phillies. I don't smoke, but I bought a Phillies cigar, and it's actually a grape cigar. And if I can get a camera on this, I want to. It's a grape cigar. It's wrapped in a plastic case. So I'm going to pull it out because this is Ash Wednesday. And the tradition, Greg, is that you take the palms that you had the previous year that have died.
From Palm Sunday, yes.
From Palm Sunday, and you use the ashes of Palm Sunday to do this. Now, I don't know how well this is working, but my finger is hot. I feel like hell. But it's going to take me a little bit of time to get some ashes, but I'm going to prove a point here at some point tonight. But I would like for somebody to go ahead and pull up the camera to show something about what we're doing here at the place, we're trying to be intellectually honest. Now, I'm making some ashes, and certainly this is not coming off of palm branches, but I'm going to make a point. Now, let me state to you why I had Greg on tonight. I wanted him to be honest about Matthew 25. I wanted him to be honest about 25:46, and also about a passage that I just threw his way, and I think that he did a great job in doing so. How do you make this thing burn quicker, Matthew?
You have to suck it in. It's
you have to suck
oxygen. Yep, you're going to have to smoke it if you want it to burn. Or find somebody in the audience who wants to.
Okay.
Or if you have to
just
have
blow
oxygen,
out.
That works pretty well too.
Okay, that's nasty. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make tonight is this: I'm going to create enough ashes with this cigar. This is tobacco, if I'm not mistaken. Simply a leaf that's far removed from any kind of palm branch. And I want to make a point because I think that we need to learn how to do somewhat of what this passage is talking about. If people are thirsty, we need to give them something to drink. I think even atheists agree with this. If you see people who are hungry, we need to give them something to eat. If they're without clothes, we need to clothe them. People in prison, we need to visit them.
I don't generalize anybody. There's bad people of every walk of life. I've met some
Sure.
pretty selfish and horrible atheists as well. So
Now, I'm getting at a point. Now, I'm going to put a number on the screen. It's not actually a number. It's our website. It's newcovenantgroup.com. Greg Brahe is a major part of the New Covenant Group. And he's becoming more and more important around here because of his honesty. And we appreciate Greg Brahe. But we're having some difficulties every time, and I'm talking about technical difficulties every time that we have shows. And we had to beef up tonight just to make this show, but we need all of you guys who are in favor of the New Covenant Group moving forward. I need you to do me a favor. Do us all a favor. Do Greg a favor. We want to buy Greg a computer and a good microphone and a good headset to where he can do better shows, because most of the time we're spending lots of time, effort, and money trying to do things with equipment that are not capable of doing it. This thing keeps going out. So what I want you to do is, I'm trying to light up this cigar and create enough ashes to put on my forehead, because I'm going to make a cross on my forehead in a few minutes. This is Ash Wednesday, excuse me. Now, the reason I'm doing this, and feel free to talk, Greg, we talked before the show. I told you that we were going to raise money for you a computer and a headset and a microphone because you need it. And if we can do this, we're going to continue to move forward rapidly with good quality, because we need to be able to talk to our guests in a way that people can actually hear us. Sunday night we got interrupted in many areas, and we don't need that to happen again. We've got powerful guests who are coming our way, and we need Greg to have the kind of equipment that's more than efficient. And I would like to see a bunch of theists. This is what I'd love to see. I'd love to see a bunch of theists who actually love atheists prove that they know how to love people by actually going to the newcovenantgroup.com. It's just newcovenantgroup.com. Look at PayPal and give a donation, because I think that a computer with a headset and a microphone is going to cost in between $800 to $1,000 for him to do it efficiently. So if you're interested in being part of the New Covenant Group, that is, in supporting what we're doing, I want you to get on the phone, call me. My phone number is 850-572-7441. Give me a text message, call me. We will tell you how to send the money in, because I'd like to see Greg Brahe our resident biologist, who is an atheist and who is extremely fair about the scripture and the conversations. He's getting people from everywhere coming our way. If you want to see this continue, I would like for you to support Greg Brahe. Hopefully this makes sense. Greg,
thank you. This is humbling in many ways. I have to say to the audience as well that I personally would greatly appreciate any donations to this, and it's completely unexpected to me. It's something that I've been working with what I can and trying to improve my equipment as I can, but I'm not sure how much I've revealed about my own situation in the past. I am a biologist by education, and I have been unemployed for the last year. I work when I can, but for the most part, I stay at home with my son. And it's a choice that my wife and I have made. It's possible that I could work and make more money, but then I'd have to let somebody else raise my son, and I know it's a little bit of a reverse on the traditional values there for the father to stay at home, but it's very special to me. Unfortunately, that means that we've made some financial sacrifices, and we live on a very shoestring budget. So when I've tried to make investments for the show, I'm not compensated for the show. This is entirely volunteer work, and it's something that we simply don't have the funding ourselves. Otherwise, I would never accept even anything like this. It's something that I wouldn't take it unless I really couldn't do it myself. So it would mean a lot if people could find it in themselves to give a little from what they have to help us and help me with this mission as well.
You're going to make me cry, Greg. I don't know how many times we talk and Casey jumps up into your lap, and it's so beautiful. And for a man to say, honey, you can go and work, and I will stay at the house. I'm a biologist, you're a teacher, but I'm going to keep plugging in. I'm going to do everything that I can, and this is what you're doing. I mean, you're unreal. And so I'm simply asking our audience, if you have any compassion about what our children need in the future, our children need some hope. They need someone who is authentically being honest. And Greg Brahe is. He's part of the New Covenant group. The New Covenant group is not a group of theists alone. We are atheist and theist here. And we're trying to group everybody together. We're trying to bring people together, people who know how to unite, not divide, pulling together as one, trying to accomplish the impossible. Because I think that we've been bashing, I'm talking about theists, we've been bashing atheists as demonic. But you can see it in Greg's eyes. This man, he's a compassionate man. He's one. I said, I love you, Greg. My goodness, a while ago when you were rendering these passages, I thought it was magnificent. It was so unique and just honest. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. And you were willing to say, this can't be eternal. And I think the Universalist community would applaud that. That's wonderful news. And this is what
there is one thing I want to say on that.
Go for
when
it.
I say it can't be eternal, that's an assessment I make in a hopeful manner and in a rational manner in saying this, that if the God of the Bible does exist, and if it's the universalist interpretation of it is to be considered accurate, that this God is love, not just the universalist, but the interpretation that this God is loving, then hell cannot exist. It's a logical impossibility for a loving God to commit somebody to an eternity of torture. However, that doesn't mean that that God can't exist either, that we can't have a non-loving God that would commit people to an eternity of torture. And I'll go on record in saying this, is that I don't know. I'm an atheist. I don't believe, but I don't think that the question, as far as humans are concerned, is whether or not there really is a God. We only are capable of interpreting the reality that we're able to perceive. And I think that the question is a belief in God justifiable? And this is what I'll say. If I die and it turns out that I'm wrong and I'm confronted with a choice, a pearly gates moment where I am given the opportunity to worship a God and proven absolutely that I was wrong. If I'm given the opportunity to worship a God or to go into a pit of eternal torture, I'm going to take the torture, because I would never, ever worship a God that would even create such a thing.
I applaud that. I would stand side by side with you. I would not worship a God who would burn you and torture his created children at all. And I thank you for those statements. I'm taking overtime tonight intentionally because I want people to get excited about sending money in. We can't get that computer without money. We can't get those headphones and that microphone without money. And so some people are saying, wow, why are you asking me for money? Every week, my wife and I, we spend a lot of money. Every month we spend thousands of dollars out of our personal pockets simply to put this program together so you can get it for free. Now, we don't ask for money very often, but I'm asking for money not for myself or my wife, but it's specifically for Greg Brahe. He needs it. He needs a good computer, not a bad computer, but a great computer that's running efficiently without a lot of noise, so he can do something that will actually bring balance and structure to the New Covenant group. We need it. And I'm simply making the point. I want to go on because we're going to keep staying here because I want to raise the money. And if you have friends who have money that can donate, call them up. Tell them to talk to Dr. Jones. I'll talk to them all night long because I'm here to tell you that we need people like Greg Brahe on our show, and it's difficult to bring him in when he has a computer that's not exactly efficient. By the way, I just got a text message from Eric Hoven. This is good. So that's positive. Things are happening. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's good. Eric Hoven just sent me a text message. So we're going to be in contact. So that's a plus point there. I have so many guests that I can't say anything about right now. And I received a lot of text messages. And by the way, Jay Baker will be here in a few days. That's Jim Baker's son. He left the faith completely and wrote a book about faith and doubt. And so where he is now, I have no clue. But he wrote a book, and we're going to be talking to him. And he's also going to be on Bob Graves' show. And we were excited about that. I want to talk to you about a movie that impressed me. I want to hear about your thoughts about this movie. It's called The Next 3 Days. Have you seen it?
I have not, no.
Okay. Now, this movie stars Russell Crowe. He's a great actor. His wife is locked up in prison. And I may not tell the story perfectly, so forgive me if I mess it up. But what happens in this movie, she actually gets sent to prison. And she's sent to prison based upon the evidence, the scientific evidence. And the scientific evidence that was presented in the courtroom was that she had her fingerprints on this particular thing that hit the person who was murdered, and this thing would be a fire extinguisher. And so her fingerprints were on the fire extinguisher, and also she had blood on her back from the victim. that is, the person who was killed. And so her explanation to the police was, I didn't see any murder. I was walking into the parking lot, and someone was coming out of the parking lot and went past me and actually broke a button off of the front part of my coat, or whatever she was wearing, and actually she could feel her tapping her on the back. And she said that when she got to her car, that there was this fire extinguisher there, so she just picked it up and moved it. And she wasn't aware that on the other side of the car there was a body laying there. And so she just got in her car and drove off, and then they did, the CSI thing, and they started putting 2 and 2 together, and finally she was arrested. And so the evidence, that is the scientific evidence, they had the fingerprints on the fire extinguisher, the murder weapon. They also had the blood of the victim on her. And so they had to believe the evidence that they found, or to believe her personal testimony, because no one else was witnessing the event. And so as the movie progresses, we have to analyze the evidence, that is scientifically, and then we have to listen to the person who was really there. And this person who was really there didn't have a clue. Later on in the show, it gives a camera angle, if you will, from another point of view, that is, from someone looking at it simply through their eyes only, which would create a sense of a witness actually watching her walk into the situation, with someone patting her on the back after this person had actually killed the victim with this fire extinguisher, puts the thing down on the other side of the lady's car so the person couldn't see the victim, and so sees her as she's running off, taps her on the back, and possibly rips a button off, and then everything else necessarily follows. And so my question is, when you look at the entire movie, you realize that empirical evidence, if you will, and empirical evidence isn't always A to Z. And I think you would admit to that, correct?
Absolutely.
And so with the evidence that they did have, the scientific evidence, they did convict the woman, and she was sent to prison. On the other hand, the testimony of the witness, the person who was there, she told the truth. And yet she lost in court. And so my question is this to you, as a biologist and atheist: is it true that sometimes we get so wrapped up in science that we forget about the other side of the picture, or the other side of the coin that may put the rest of the pieces together?
I can certainly say that there are situations that happens, and particularly I think that it's more significant when we talk about things like medicine. There's so many times where we look at the illness and we look at the symptoms instead of looking at the person, and we take into account only what we are seeing and what the evidence there is, when there's more that could potentially be gleaned in a valuable way from the person. I know that when my son starts crying in the other room, I can go to him and I can generally piece together what happened. There's I heard a crash. That's an audible form of evidence. There's a toy that is out of place, and he's holding his head. I can guess that what happened is he fell down and he bumped his head. I mean, I can put it together pretty well, but there's times when I've asked him what happened, and I've been entirely wrong. Just last week he had tried to lift a rather large a toy. It's like a parking ramp for cars. Tried to lift that up and had stumbled and smacked himself right in the forehead with it. And when he fell down, it fell right back into place. So I could only assume in the situation that what had happened was he had fallen and hit his head on something. But the reality was, and I learned this by asking him, and he showed me that he tried to pick it up and he tried to bump his head. He speaks remarkably well for a child who just turned 2. But it helped in that situation to be able to get the testimony of the person directly involved with it. So it's certainly not something that we need to entirely discount. However, in the situation of things like a person going to court, I can tell you, if I killed a person and I didn't want to go to prison for it, I'd come up with a plausible form of deniability as well. That there are ways to concoct. I mean, even as a child, my brother and I would fight, we'd wrestle, and we'd occasionally break things, or I would do something wrong. And it's easy to fabricate a story that ties up all of the loose ends and makes sure everything. And unfortunately, from a third-party perspective, it's not always possible to tell which is which. But what you can tell is that there's a broken lamp.
The number is 850-572-7441. We're here raising money for Greg Brahe tonight. You can simply go to the New Covenant Group. It's newcovenantgroup.com. And you can go to the upper right-hand corner of our website, and there is a PayPal account. And you can put on that PayPal account tonight, really easy, enough money. If all of us will get together and put money in that account, we can buy Greg a computer, a good microphone, and a great headset to where he sounds almost as good, if not better, than Bob Graves. I'm not trying to make Bob Graves jealous. I mean, Bob sounds wonderful. He's an awesome person.
Well, no matter how good of equipment I get, I'm always going to have my nasal Wisconsin accent, and it's just not be with his dulcet tones.
Okay, as we're waiting for people to call in, I'm going to do something because this is Ash Wednesday. I wanted to make a point, so I'm going to take these ashes. I've created this little thing. It's almost like an ashtray. I have my cigar. I lit it a while ago, and I'm simply going to do, what these priests do. I'm going to try to do it without getting it in my eyes. I think you make this cross on your forehead, if I'm not mistaken. And okay, that's good enough. I've got this cross on my forehead. And the reason that I'm doing this tonight is because I've had so many theists state that you don't believe that Jesus was crucified to take care of our sins. And I keep telling people it's unfortunate that people actually murdered him, murdered a human being. And for some reason, why people get so excited and say, thank God Jesus was murdered, I really can't get into that. Now today, lots of people are wearing on their forehead what I'm wearing on my forehead now. Because we have 46 days, give or take. This is very traditional. To Easter. And we have to allow for 6 days because we have 6 Sabbath days, the holy days. Because if you're found picking up firewood on the Sabbath, they will stone you. I'm simply saying I reject all that. So what I have on my forehead is all about superstition and myth. And people continue to make this stuff up, and they continue to practice this. And I'm not putting this on my forehead to compliment people who do so. I'm simply doing what Jesus did when he went to the cross. He went to the cross, if we understand the language of the Scripture, not to compliment the people. He knew that people were going to kill him. And he knew that it would be by crucifixion, because those people wanted to say a good person one who would do good to everyone, one who would teach people how to love people. The only thing that religious people would do to you would be to put you on the cross and say that you're cursed of God. I'm simply saying the symbol of the cross indicates to those people who believe in a maniacal God that you are cursed of God. And I'm like Greg. If God is that maniacal, I would rather take the curses of God and burn in hell than to live with him. Now this is about intellectual honesty. It's about integrity. It's about saying, this is what I think to be true. I don't have to look in the Bible and determine what's right or wrong. It's not my book of authority. Neither is any other book. I simply read enough books to realize that I have a mind of my own and I can make up my own mind. And so my point is, I have something on my forehead, a cross. It was a symbol that says, you're cursed of God. Now it's true. I get called a heretic, the Antichrist, Lucifer, Satan, all kinds of things. People think I am cursed of God. So be it. But this cross on my head is mocking that kind of mindset. I intend to do everything that I can to shut down churches. I'm not kidding.
Let me show you what in this one, I'm with you. I'm go ahead and share my screen instead of my picture here. This is, I'm hoping you guys can see it. Oh, that's the wrong. That is what I changed my profile picture to on Facebook today. I do a lot of activism on Facebook, and I made it myself, tried to make it look like ashes, but if I had a cigar right now, I would be happy to mark myself in such a way. And for me, it wouldn't be a cross. And I specifically, I chose the scarlet letter, or the A there for the scarlet letter reference as well in the Out campaign of the atheists. But it's silly in a way. But at the same time, I will say that there is a group cohesiveness that comes with it. My wife even brought it up. It's a shared common experience, which is actually an important sociological phenomenon in that respect. But I went grocery shopping with my son this morning, and as I walked through the grocery store, I saw people with crosses on their shoulders, and I knew that these people were Christians, and most likely, I think it's mainly Catholics and Lutherans that do that. I don't know how many other traditions do, but it was it certainly set them apart and allowed them to identify each other, and they shared that experience in common. So for that, on a sociological standpoint, I can understand that there might be some in-group tribal cohesiveness benefits, but you're absolutely right that it's something, it's based on superstition, right. And it's something that we can't get past until we are willing to let things like that go. It's simply, I don't even know what words to use here. It's just mind-boggling to me that people are willing to do this for the day, to walk around with a smudge of ashes on their forehead as a symbol of their faith, but they're not willing to do the feeding of the poor and the feeding of the hungry, the housing of the poor. The things that would be, in my opinion, mark you as a good person, if not necessarily as a Christian. Or, to use the more liberal understanding of the term Christian, is if the deeds are what make it and not the faith, then it certainly could put you into that category in that respect. So I also want to make a quick comment. You said that Jesus was killed and he was murdered, and there's people who laud that. Even the fact that it's a cross that gets put on the forehead it's a reference, and a cross is a murder device. Exactly. The modern day equivalent would be wearing an electric chair around your neck, or drawing a little electric chair on your forehead in ashes, or I, I don't know, maybe battery acid to get the electricity out of it. But
You know, the cross says that you are cursed of God, you're against God, you're anti-God. It's almost equivalent in a sense to the A that you're suggesting. And Jesus was very willing to say, take me there, that's fine. I want to embarrass the theological community. And so I don't put this on my forehead to compliment the theist. I put this on my forehead to say that idea that you have that Jesus died in order to satisfy this maniacal father somewhere, this is crazy. And it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit to this message. You sat there and read tonight with me, and I loved your honesty. You said, you know, this sounds really good. And then if you keep reading, wow, it creates a tension. Something doesn't make sense. And it's because, Greg, you know how to read. Thank God. Well, you know what I'm talking about. Thank God you know how to read. I mean, you're educated. I know how to read English. But it's sad that theists are not willing simply to read the text and see the double-mindedness of Scripture. You know, the conundrums, if you will. And it seems like Christians or theists are always trying to reconcile or dodge them or put their head in the hole and pretend like they're not there. And so I'm going to ask again, get on the phone, call me, text me, do whatever you can, call your friends. Let's raise some money tonight. Greg Brahe needs a computer. He needs a microphone. He needs a right headset. We need him involved for a long time, forever that is, in doing what we do here at the New Covenant Group. And I'm asking you again.
Of course, as an atheist, forever just means until I die.
Well, it took me forever to go to the store to get this cigar, so please understand my foreverisms. So if you're interested in supporting and demonstrating how much you love people, why don't you get outside of your theological box? If you're an atheist tonight, you should get out $50 to $100, maybe $500. Some of you guys could cover the whole thing. Just contact me. We want to bless Greg. This is not about us. This is about Greg tonight. We love him so much. He's doing so much for all of us. We need to thank him. And I think that if we do this, we're showing something that's genuine. We're doing what Jesus was trying to teach. You see somebody that needs water, you give them something to drink. You see someone without clothes, you clothe them. You see someone like Greg who is touching so many people with honesty. What do? You give them what they need so they can move forward. We need givers, not takers. Givers will make this world work properly. So I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. Greg, any final words?
Just one final thing, aside from a very, very humble thank you to any people that donated or have in any way helped the show, spread the word about us, told your friends, invited somebody to watch us. If you can't afford to give towards the cause monetarily, we appreciate your support in any way. And I personally appreciate the New Covenant Group and the opportunities it's given me and given, and I guess not just the opportunities, but the experiences that it's given me. It's been an incredible journey, and I look forward to the years to come of growing with the New Covenant Group and being part of it. And I personally would like to appeal for anybody to help as part of the growth. There are certainly things that I'm holding the team back. It's a sad reality, but my equipment is by far the worst of what anybody has. So any donations would be very, very much appreciated, and make a significant difference. But the last thing, on a more theological note before we leave, is I don't feel that we addressed one thing quite completely tonight, and that was what Jesus was actually killed for. And I mean, again, disregarding whether or not the translations are accurate or any of that nature, what we need to consider is who it was that sentenced him or wanted him dead and why they wanted him dead. And you know what that was for? That was for doing exactly what we're doing right now. He was being a heretic. He was condemned to die for blasphemy, for questioning the church. I'm proud to follow in that tradition, and I would hope that other people are as well. So be a heretic with us, blaspheme a little against the church, and help the New Covenant group.
I couldn't have stated it better, Greg. You have been an awesome guest, awesome friend, and you're the best. We love you so much. So get out your wallet. Learn to be a giver. Learn how to bring people together. Support people who are like Greg. This guy has a heart. I'm not begging. I wouldn't beg you. I'm simply trying to encourage you to be good. He has a need, and we need to supply it. Thank you for your time.